Maybe the people want to watch him glove up.
There's definitely somebody out there.
It's like Batman
Right,
when he puts
start recording now.
his suit on.
It's being recorded, bro.
Oh. Alright guys, so if you saw the last video, my engine blew up on the dyno, got rod knock. And unfortunately, that's something I'm becoming familiar with. I'm getting used to it, which is not good. But I was sitting here thinking about it. There's a lot of things to consider here, and I'm going to break it down to you as quickly as I can. I don't want to make this super long. So, I'll start by saying this. Obviously, as a shop owner, it does not reflect well on me to have problems all the time with my own cars. So let me explain something to defend myself here. As Mark Rober says, I'm a firm believer in the scientific method. Now, what does that mean? The scientific method, it starts when we're babies, right? When you're a baby, what are you doing? You're rolling around on the floor looking for stuff to grab and stuff in your mouth to experiment, right? What does this taste like? What is this? What is that? And then you grow up a little bit. You stick a fork in the light socket, and you get shocked. You're like, oh, you're learning. You're always experimenting. It's human nature to experiment, and that's what's created some of the best innovations in the world. Is that human spirit to always be innovating and learning. I think that's the scientific method, right? You have an idea, you put it to the test. You fail, you put it to the test again. You improve, and you put it to the test. And now you could argue, right, that, well, everybody's already done this. The 2JZ drag race guys have been doing this forever, and just copy paste, right? It's really easy. Just do what they say to do. That's not satisfying for me. I understand that that's probably the way to do it, and spend money, and it works, right? There's always another way. There's always another way, and for me, it's an adventure, and I learn, and it's also enjoyable for me to struggle and to fail and to learn and to make improvements. And my goal is always to try and find the least expensive way to do something with the best result. I don't know why. Sometimes I kick myself. I end up spending twice as much learning that lesson, but I enjoy it. And that's part of the reason I like showing you guys what I do, is because what's the point of wasting all that money and learning the lesson if I don't share it with other people? I don't know. So I'm going to defend myself by saying, when I do stuff on my car, and I even tell you in my video, if you watch my first video from this series, I say right away, look, I'm using used oil coolers that potentially have some junk in them, but I'm putting them through the filter. So, it's risky. I had the main bearing that was missing a tang tab inside the block. It's risky, but I don't think that's a failure point, right? But it's all risky. I'm reusing the rods that were purple from extreme heat. I had them ground out, so I knew that they were perfectly round, but I didn't know about the integrity of the material that was being used since they'd already been superheated, right? So there's all these things that were potential failure points in the engine, and guess what? The engine failed. So now I'm really excited to pull the engine out and forensically diagnose to figure out what happened to the engine. Was it debris from the oil coolers that got pushed out, somehow went through the filter, it plugged up one of the bearing holes and caused rod knock? Maybe. I don't think so, but I can't say that's not possible. Was it something with that bearing tang? I don't think so, because it's a rod knock, not a main bearing, and the one that was missing the tang was a main bearing, so that's not the issue. Was it one of the rods being purple and from running high RPM and all this stuff, it caused it? Possibly. I don't think so, and I'll explain why later in the video. But I really think what happened is, based on watching the logs and how it went down, we went from high RPM, high temperature, high load, to the engine stalling immediately. And I don't fully understand why, but I think you need to have oil pressure as the engine comes off of that high RPM, high load, high demand situation, right? It's not like losing oil pressure at 7,000 RPM. I had oil pressure at 7,000 RPM, but as soon as I clutched in and the engine started to drop RPM, that's when I lost oil pressure and the engine stalled. So I don't know if it's really hot. I don't know exactly what's going on inside the engine to say it's hot and then the bearing sticks to the crank for a second, and then when you crank it up, it kind of rips some material off the bearing. But basically, if I were to recreate what the logs showed, you'd be That's exactly what happened. That's the last time the engine ran. And so to go from running fine at 7,000 RPM to a slow crank and then a knock after stalling, I don't think so. I don't think it was a plugged oil passage. I don't think it was anything to do with the rod itself. And the reason I'm confident about this is because I've had something like this happen. I don't remember which car, because like I said, I've had so many failures, I can't keep track of them all. But I had another car that did a really similar thing. I was at a high RPM, high heat situation, and then it stalled, and when I went to crank it, it was cranked really slow. It's almost like you can feel the bearing sticking to the crank. And then when it starts, it knocks. I know I've had this situation happen before, not on the dyno, but at a drift event. So I think that's what happened. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to prove it, but I wanna tear the engine apart and find out what's going on. So let's get into it. All right, so I just drained out the oil, got this thing up on the lift, and there's definitely some metal in here. I don't know if you guys can see it very well through the camera. There's definitely some metal, but it's not like big flakes or chunks. And so the problem with that, I don't know if I'm gonna get a shot like this, but you know, it's just like, it's like glittery. It's not like big bearing flakes. The problem with that is this is a brand new motor on break-in. So is that just like break-in material? Literally the first oil change, right? Or is that, you know, is it strictly from the bearings getting smoked? How much of that is scraping, you know, off of the honed cylinder walls, or how much of that is bearing material? It's hard to say. But I'm gonna pull the oil pan and see what kind of chunks or flakes we have in the bottom, because, you know, obviously I've never understood this, but where the drain plug is always a little bit higher than the bottom. So no matter what, you always have a little bit of oil left when you change oil. So all the heavy material and flakes should be in the pan still. So it should give us a good idea of what we're looking at once we get that pan off. So we decided to do a subframe out job. We're gonna drop the subframe. We've got a engine thing holding it up top. We're taking out just the control arms on both sides, the main brace. I'm gonna leave the steering rack attached, hopefully. And then once we get all the suspension stuff disconnected, it should just drop right out. Hopefully the engine stays where it belongs up there and doesn't fall on top of us. And then we're just gonna start taking out oil pan bolts, try and get the oil pan out. We got these bolts out. We got the control arms off. We ended up taking the coilovers off so the arm is free to move around, because they were kind of stuck up in that position. So now that we got them down and out, steering rack is off. We took out the rag joint coupler, whatever it's called, so we have a little bit more space. Now, if everything's good, hopefully the engine's supported up top, the subframe will just come out, and then we got full access to the oil pan. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful. Uh-oh. Now I'm in a pickle. Slide this out of the way, and it's out. Does Jake have a face of approval, or is that disapproval?
No, that was approval. At first I was like, I'm gonna do that on the 4-post.
Yeah.
Like
well, yeah, I cornered myself. Well, look at the jack stands. We had to put jack stands on the 4-post, which I didn't think of that until it was too late. I was like, oh, let's just make it happen. Yeah. But it's out. Let's go. Next step. Okay, so to get this lower pan off, what we don't want to do is put a huge bend in one corner. So what I do is I tap a screwdriver in a little bit without bending it too much, and then I basically work my way around, kind of like cutting out a front windshield. You want to work your way around with some sort of a blade or something sharp. Or if you're going to use a screwdriver like this, do it in a few places until it starts to pry down. That way, if I pry excessively in that one corner, when I go to put it back on, that's going to be a low spot, and it's going to be really hard for the silicone or the RTV to fill in that spot. So basically, once I create a gap, I work my way around. On this pan, we use the right stuff, which is really strong adhesive. Oh, and then once it starts to go, you want to make sure you're ready, because there's going to be a little bit of oil in there, and it'll go everywhere if you're not careful. Look at all that material. That's pretty bad. That is pretty rough. Dang. This kind of gives me an idea of what we're going to find. It's like panning for gold. This gives me an idea of what we're going to find when we take that bearing cap off, but that's it's about as bad as it gets for rod knock. All right, let's get deeper into it. All right, now we're on to the upper pan. There's a little spot on both sides between the ear of the block and the top of the oil pan. They allow you to slip a screwdriver or a pry bar in there. So I'm gonna be really careful not to break that, but man, it's coming off pretty easy. And this pan won't bend, it'll just break. So you gotta be more careful with this. And this is one you really wanna be careful that you double check that there's no hidden bolts. If you're watching this and do it on your car, we'll go through it. There's 2 in the front. There's 4 inside the oil pan, so 2, 2, 2, 2, not 4 on each side, so 8 total. And then back here you got 1, 2, 3 on each side, and then the big ones, these are 14s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all the oil pan bolts in there. And then make sure you get the ones out of the trans, right? Because your belt housing. Usually you'll be doing this with the engine out of the car, but if it's in the car, you gotta make sure you get your trans to oil pan bolts off. All right, let's keep prying. Get this thing out of here. Right up in there, there's a little spot to get your screwdriver in. But since my wastegate's in the way, I can't really get that, so I'm gonna focus on working my way back like I did with the other one. All right, I was struggling a bit with this. I didn't film all that, smashed my finger, said some words that I probably shouldn't have said. And I realize now, I've never taken an oil pan off with the trans on like this. This is the first time I'm doing it. So I think the way I was prying, it wasn't allowing it to like move the way I was used to, so I really had to work my way around it differently than I normally do. And so now we're good. I'll spare you all that boringness. And this is coming off now. Oh good. Oil everywhere. Alright. Now we have access to everything we need. So I'm gonna let this drip for a bit, grab some lunch, and then we'll be back to check on all the bearings. Alright, we're back from lunch and we got all this taken apart, and I went through and checked them all. Number 1 is decent, number 2 is decent. You see they're blue from, that was from before, not from this time. Number 3, a little bit knocky. Number 4 is decent. Number 5, where's my hand? Number 5 is decent. Number 6 has a little bit. But number 3 got it the worst. So we're gonna take them out one by one, check the bearings, check the clearances, measure the roundness of the rods, do our due diligence before I decide whether we're gonna bearing slap it or pull the motor. Bolts. All right, get on out of there. Got me again. All right. It does kind of look like some crap came through the bearing hole a little bit. Let's pull that top bearing off. Get on out of there now. Come on. Okay. I don't know, that's hard to tell. It doesn't really look like a lot of stuff came through there. What'll happen is you'll see, this is the oil feed hole. And so you'll see junk come through here, through the crankshaft, and then basically you'll see a trail of like debris through this hole. and it'll look like debris came through this hole and got squished out through there, but I don't really see it. There's not immediately around that hole what I would expect to see. So I'm thinking that it wasn't necessarily contamination through there. But let's keep going. We'll go to number 3 and see what we find. All right, this is number 3. This was the bad one. Oh, I just got dripped on again. I want to see what this bearing looks like. What bearing? Oh, that one's spun. You can look up in there. You can see the half of the bearing shell. Is that a good shot of it? Yeah, you can see right there is where the bearing should be. Over there, it's 90 degrees out of where it should be. So let's try and get those bearings out of there. This might be a deal breaker right here. This might be too much for this crankshaft to survive. I'm gonna have to literally pry these bearings out of here. Take a look in there, Jake. Number 3.
Oh, yeah. Did you feel any of the other ones?
Yeah.
Did they feel loose?
Number 3 and number 6 were the ones that I could feel.
This one didn't feel loose to you?
And number 5. I'm not as strong as you are, Jake.
Oh, you already loosened that.
Yeah. Yep. Dang. Those ones didn't look too bad. I already got these out. 1 and 2. Alright, so got them all loose. I'm gonna have to spin the crankshaft over a little bit to get that one down. To get the bearing, I gotta get the rod down so I can pry the bearings off of it and see how bad that journal is. I guess let's take off what we can while we're here, right? That's where that goes for sure. I mean, it's not terrible. Maybe number 4 is the worst. This did have some, this had some play in it for sure. I don't know. All right, guys, so after checking all this out and looking at what we got the bearings out. Those are completely smoked. That was obviously the problem one. Now, a couple interesting things here. You guys saw when we were shaking them, or moving them up and down, 5, 6, obviously 3. 1 was pretty good, which ironically 1 is the one that was not purpled already. All these were already purpled. I had them machined after they were already purpled, but I did nothing to reheat treat them or anything. So that was something that was questionable, and now I'm starting to lean towards that might have been the issue. The reason I say that is because Jake found up and down play. I was wiggling them sideways. I did not find any play in number 5. However, Jake did. So he comes back over and he wiggles it up and down. So now I'm starting to wonder if they grew this way, if they ovaled or egg-shaped out this way, but not this way, which would make me think that this metal is weak, right? Because an aftermarket rod should not have any problem with 450 horsepower, but the bottom of the rod is not affected by the power stroke. So it shouldn't matter if you have 1,000 or whatever horsepower, right? It really has more to do with RPM when it swings back up and it's pulling the rod up. That's what the bottom of the cap does. So usually RPM will affect the strength of bolts and the bottom part of the rod. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what makes me think that after a few 7,000 RPM pulls, it might have actually stretched the bottom part of the cap. So I decided I'm not going to run this. I'm going to leave it how it is because in the name of forensic diagnostics, I really want to figure out what happened. So I don't want to take any chances on not knowing what caused this. So next week, we're going to pull the engine out. I'm going to take all the rods out individually, and we're going to measure them for round and see if they actually stretched at all. If they did stretch, then 100% I'm going to call it that using purpled rods was a bad idea. Right now, that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards based on what we found so far. So chime in right now with your comments telling me how stupid I am or whether you think that's a possibility or whatever. But scientific method, and forensic diagnostics. Hopefully we get to the bottom of it. So obviously I know that it was stupid to use parts that were questionable, right? But that's why I explained in the beginning of the video. So I can't be upset about this because I brought this on myself, and I'm not upset about it, right? Obviously I want to learn something. I actually did a bunch of research trying to see if anybody had any information about reusing rods that had been overheated, or if they were reheat treated, or if you could send them out for some sort of a treatment. I found zero stuff in my searching about that. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna test it out. And I knew that it could go sideways. I could go wrong. And it looks to me right now that that's what happened. And you can call me an idiot, but I knew what I was doing. I knew there was a risk. I knew I could be in this exact situation that I'm in right now. So I can't be upset about it. Guys, we're back at it again today. We're gonna be pulling this motor out and seeing what's going on with it. I wanna figure out if those rods are ovaled out from being purpled, or if something else happened. But today's the day to figure that out. So really bummed that we didn't get to drive this weekend, but I don't want to miss any more events in this car. So I want to get it done, be able to drive it, test it a little bit, make sure everything's solid before we hit the track. So this is our chance to make sure it's 100% good, put all the good parts in it, get it on the dyno again, make sure it's, shake it down, all that stuff. Because I still don't know how it drives, the angle, the suspension, the alignment, all that stuff needs to be done. So now we got a little bit more time. Let's get into it. So as much as I didn't want to take this back out again, it reminds me of how well we put this together for the ease of putting the engine in and out, right? So we've got this clip, right? So I can just leave the coils where they're at. I've got this other connector that goes under the manifold that breaks out to the temperature and pressure sensors. So the wiring harness is done such a way, it took me literally like 30 seconds to unclip everything and then flop it off to the side. Even the two knock sensors on the manifold. With this forward-facing manifold, it's really easy to reach down here and get everything underneath. It's just really easy to do the wiring. Wiring is one of the things that usually will kick your butt when you're taking an engine out, but not in this car. So other than that, like the turbo's really easy, the wastegate, the downpipe, the Wiggins clamps, everything is pretty quick release on this car. You know, taking out the power steering is just gonna stay there. Literally the accessories are just an alternator and a water pump. It's like really straightforward. So I think this engine's gonna come out really quickly, which is nice. Obviously we'd rather not be doing this, but the fact that we have to do it, it's a really easy car to work on at this point. Engine is out of the car on the engine stand. So now it's time to do the rapid teardown. We're gonna take all the accessories, not all of them, but we're gonna do the minimal, leave the head, leave the turbo intact, but just remove it. And then strip the block from all the accessories. And then basically the goal is to get the crankshaft out and get the rods out. So it's just a head off and oil pan off, which is already off, so half the work's already done. I don't think we'll need to, I don't think we need to take the block to the machine shop. We'll just, we'll give it a pressure wash here. What do you call it? A sponge bath. We'll use some brake clean and a rag and clean out all the ports. What's nice is that I put these service ports for cleaning in the back, so I can literally take those out and then run water through there to flush them out. So we shouldn't have any trapped junk in there. And then this time I plan on cleaning the oil coolers properly, but I want to make sure this is all good to go. So crankshaft out. We'll measure it up, get new rods, put it all back together, and then good to go. All right, just like that, the cylinder head is back off. And actually looks pretty good. Like it's burning pretty well. Oh, what's that? I don't like that. Or that. What's going on here? Anyways, none of that's our problem. Engine's got very few miles on it, if at all. And looks pretty good there. I'm thinking about trying to reuse this head gasket. These guys are trying to talk me out of it, but I want to reuse this head gasket because I like problems and I want more problems in the future. But we're gonna flip this thing over and then check the rods. I want to get the rods and pistons out of it and then start measuring all that stuff and see if those rods are ovaled out or not. Get out of there. Alright, so these are all the purple rods. Number 3, which one's number 3? So that's not even the most purple one, which is wild. Like that one's almost black. And this is the one that spun first. So what I'm gonna do now, number 3, is I'm gonna take these, 1, 2, 3, bolt these together and then measure, and I'll bet you we're gonna be egg-shaped this way when I take a measurement. That's my suspicion. It's time to find out. So, couple things. We got the motor torn apart, and there is damage on the main bearings. So the crank looked fine, so I was like, oh, we're fine. But then as soon as we got it out, you can see there's damage on the mains. This is probably a good example right here. The thrusts have no damage, so I know it wasn't a thrust issue, but pretty much all the mains look like that. So I'm starting to think that there was junk that went through the motor. But let's check this out. We got all the rods and pistons separated. I got the measurement here. We're dialed in at 2.166. 2.166, okay? Calibrate the tool to 2.166. Bam, bam, let's check it out. There we go. We're on 0. Focus on the 0. Yeah, we're there. We're there. Anyways, we're there. I already verified it. So, rod number 3. We'll start with that one. This was the worst of all the rods. This is the one that spun. Boom. We're like really, really close. Okay, we'll go sideways that way. This is the way I thought they'd be egg-shaped. Nope. We'll go this way. Specs out every way we look at it. That's the worst of them. Now let's get some consistency. Number 6, for example. Boom, on the money. That's the long way too. Look down here on the big end. Measuring it the long way, and we're on the money. And then if we turn it this way, same measurement. I mean, we're within a half, like almost nothing. And the guy that cut these cut them spot on, like they were spot on. And so it doesn't look like they grew at all. So now I'm sitting here looking at, I've already been through them all, I just want to show you guys. Now we're looking at the potential of, obviously, this isn't the problem. So what is the problem? Now I'm back to thinking, was it a heat event that made the bearings grab? Like I originally thought in the last video, where when I clutched in and it stalled, did that create some sort of an oil pressure heat event which grabbed the bearings? But then we're looking at like the mains and the rods, every single bearing has some sort of damage on it. So now I'm back to thinking maybe there was junk. Maybe junk came through the oil coolers. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at, right? I've measured everything. Everything looks really good. The crank was just freshly cut. That was in spec. So if everything's in spec and you still have damage, you gotta start looking at what it could potentially be. And if we look at these bearings, it kind of looks like maybe there's some junk deposited, you know? That's a different one. There's just like, it's like junk came out and just got wiped right through there, right? And then even looking at the block side, which is where the junk would have been introduced, like, look at that. You can just see like the indents. So maybe I was just, maybe I was in denial, but it kind of looks like this one's got it really bad too. There's junk everywhere on that. It just looks like little pieces of junk went in there and spun around. And I guess that would explain why it ran for a while, right? And then eventually number 3 spun, and that's when it started knocking. I don't know. That's where we're at right now. So my plan right now is to get different rods, different crank, make sure I got new bearings, and then I'm gonna triple check it this time, checking the clearances, plastic gauge. The hone is still good, the rings are all still good, so I'm gonna use this block again. But I put these plugs in here so I can get in there really good and clean it out. So obviously I want to clean out any passageway in here. I'm gonna swap out those oil coolers. I'm not gonna risk that again. And then we're losing a little bit of the budgetness of this build, but I don't want to go through this problem again. I want this car to be solid, because in all reality, I did lose out some income last weekend by not having this car ready to do its job, which is to give ride-alongs. So at some point you have to have reliability to have a car that's gonna make you money. And this is a car that's gonna make me money. So that's the move we're gonna make right now. But this is not what I expected to find. And I'm still up in the air on what the problem was. We're still going on theories and suspicions, but I gotta get to the bottom of it. Gotta get to the bottom of it. on to the next step. I've definitely cut open filters, but I usually use some sort of a grinder or something that puts more shavings into the filter. So we found this exhaust tailpipe cutter that we had, and I want to see what we get out of this thing. I really want to inspect this filter and see what kind of shavings we have. I want to see if there was a bunch of junk in the oil cooler, but it's like, how am I going to differentiate between what happened before the failure and what happened after? That'll tell us kind of what's going on. But I didn't want to, like I said, I want to do as much forensic analysis, forensic diagnostics as we can to figure out just what happened to this thing.
There we go. Nice.
Don't need that. Don't need this.
That was my favorite part, Jesse.
I gotta wipe this thing down.
Someone needs an alignment. There's quite a bit of material in there. Enough to cause a low oil pressure? I don't know. But there is quite a bit of material. I don't know. What do you think, Jake? I mean, look at that stuff.
Yeah. You could cut the filter media with a razor knife.
And then stretch it out?
And then compress all the oil out of it and then stretch it out.
Okay, we'll be back. You can tell Jake's done this before.
I haven't. Just watched a lot of Project Farm, not a sponsor.
Oh.
Filter side by sides.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a big enough piece, huh?
Yeah, that'll give us a good sample of what's going on. How do you get the oil out?
So
that stuff on the rag all came into that filter?
Yeah.
Yummy.
We'll go over here. And like. Yeah. Run that down. There we go. I'm gonna spin the inside.
Quite a bit of junk in there. Wow, like some of those.
You want to make a glimmer of light?
Look at that piece right there. Or is that just a... No, that's a piece of something shiny.
Oh yeah.
Big piece.
I guess I wonder if any of this was enough to make it bypass the filter, you know? Just start putting junk right back into the engine.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of metal.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're back again with budget build, rebuild. Hasn't even hit the track, hasn't even left the dyno, and we're rebuilding it. But here's what we found. When I bought all these parts from Caleb, he did give me a full set of extra rods, but I was trying to save my blue rods to be extra super budget, even though these cost me nothing. Well, they came with the car. And here's where we're at. We measured all the rods. They're not out of round. So I don't think the rods were the problem, but I am not going to put them back in that engine, right? Just peace of mind. I want to prove to myself wrong by putting them back in, but everybody around me is just being like, don't do that. And I really want the car to run, so I don't want to do that. I will use those rods again. I promise you that. But not in this car. Can't handle that. So here's what we came up with. When Caleb had this engine fail, he had one rod failure, and so he bought an extra rod, and so all these rods should be good. We just took them off these were factory 1J pistons with 2J rods in a 2J block, a combo that I came up with that I really like. I think it's a good combo, but I'm not going to use these pistons because we have those super high comp pistons, and that's what we're sticking with. So I want to verify that these rods are good. Ashton and I just went through, cleaned them all up, And now we're gonna torque them down, measure the bore, make sure they're round. If they're not, then we'll send them to the machine shop. If they are good, and my bearings show up from turn 14 today, then we can assemble everything. If the rods have to go to the machine shop, then it's gonna have to wait until after FD Long Beach. But that's the plan for today. Let's cut to a time lapse. Go. All right, so we got all the rods and pistons put together. Everything's lined up. Obviously the rings are fairly new. I mean, brand new. So they're already broken into the cylinder, so I wanted to keep them in the corresponding holes they're gonna go to. So we got everything lined up how it should be. These rods all spec'd out like mint. So everything should go together. I'm just waiting on the bearings to show up from turn 14, but we can go put the crankshaft in and start doing some more measurements, make sure the crank is in spec, and hopefully when the bearings show up, we can just plop it all together and make sure that it's all gonna be good. We could also stuff the pistons in right now and then put the bearings in when we get them. Maybe we'll start doing that, but on to the next step. Let's go. So this is a pilot bearing that we make for the CD09 adapter kit. It actually has a Nismo roller bearing, needle roller bearing inside, as opposed to like the Nissan brass bushing whatever junk. So this is a lot better, and this is a steel machine piece. A lot of the companies that make them are aluminum, and I've seen them just get completely blown out. So we manufactured this and made this, but now I have a crankshaft that needs machined, and so I want to use this bearing on another crank, and so I had to make a tool to get it out with. So I literally just went and made a little puller tool out of some scrap and a bolt, and the idea is that this is going to push on the very inside of the crank. These are going to hold the bearing, which these holes are tapped to M6 1.0. And then as you drive this in, obviously it'd be better if I had a real bolt, but this is what I could find. It'll slowly pull that out. We'll see if it works as intended. So we got the old crankshaft there with the bearing out, and then we've got the crankshaft here that's been cut. It's 10 over, which is 0.25 millimeters. So as good as that is, I want to verify. I want to make sure that the machine shop that cut it properly, and then I want to check that one that came out and make sure there's no problems with the measurements on that, because they both came from the same machine shop. And like I said, I want to verify that everything was done correctly on my end and on every other end, right? Whether the rods, the bearings, whatever. So I'm gonna go ahead and check this to make sure that it is within spec. So a spec of 25 over should have a measurement, and I was looking on the I found the specifications for 2JZ GTE, and main journal, we'll check mains first, is they have actually a spec for 25 over, 2.430. So that's what I set this to. We have 2.4, and then 3, and then 0. So this should be our go, no go checker. So this is the crankshaft that came out. Looks pretty good. Yep. Obviously you guys can't feel it, but it feels good. It's not like too loose or too tight. So all the mains are within spec on the crank that came out. There we go. That one's a little bit tight. That one's good. That one's good. That one's good. This is a lot easier with 2 hands. That one's good. That one's good. That one's a little bit tight. Oh, there we go. That's actually good. Okay, so now let's go check the rods. So the measurement for the, what would it be called? Crank pin diameter. 25 over is going to be 2.037. 2.037. Let's set the tool for that. I'm going to go ahead and check the old crank first. Yep, spec. That one's good. That's the one that spun. It's pretty good. That one's good. That one's good. And that one's good. So it wasn't a crank problem, and it wasn't a rod problem. This is the new crank, just verifying before I put it in. I always want to verify. Trust but verify, or don't trust, but always verify. Yep, that's all good. So I'm gonna say this crank is good to go in. All right guys, so I put the main bearings in, measured all the clearances. I think everything's good. I don't have the rod bearings yet. I'm waiting for those to come in. So I'm gonna cover the motor up for now. No debris, no nothing. I don't want anything getting inside of here. I want it to be as clean as possible, so we can leave it as clean as we made it right now. So I set everything in here so we wouldn't lose anything. Set the main caps, put the bearings, everything except the rod bearings. All the rod caps are in place. Everything's in order. So I'm gonna go ahead and bag it up, lock it up for the weekend, and then once the rod bearings are here, we can finish assembly, do all the plastic gauge checks, lube it up, put it together, put the head on, put it back in the car, put it on the dyno, and no more problems. We'll see you soon. Bye. All right, guys, welcome back. We skipped a few steps. We made it back from Long Beach, and I got on this project right away. Bearings were here, slapped that together. I won't say I forgot to record. I just think it's kind of boring because I've done so many engine assembly videos that skip all that. But this is not boring right here. The old bread method for getting this pilot bearing out. So I decided that's where we're going to pick up on this part of the video. You just stuff some bread in there. And we're actually, we're making progress with just one slice. It's pretty impressive. But as far as the assembly on this engine, everything went together pretty smooth. I double checked, triple checked all the measurements. And I think everything's gonna be good to go on this thing. So we did replace the oil coolers, so I wasn't gonna risk that again. I think, oh, there it is. Look at that. Boom, bearing is out. Now I gotta get the bread out of there.
Eat it.
If you, no, you told me it was moldy bread to start with. Pretty impressive. The power of bread. You know what I'm saying? You want to put this back in the loaf?
Yeah, I'll save that for PB&J tomorrow.
Okay. This is the tool I made. I think I showed you guys this. I haven't even touched the bearing since I pulled it out, but I got to keep this tool on the shelf. That's handy. This is the D-Spare custom pilot bearing. It's actually a bearing instead of a bushing. Ooh, kind of crunchy. Crunch, 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 crunch. But this just goes right there. And then the thing goes in there, and then stuff happens. So that'll be nice. Now we're gonna put the clutch on, put the trans on. I have a brand new CD09 that went in the chaser that was brand new out of the box. I drove it a couple times. It started getting a little small, grinding third. I'm gonna actually put that in this because the Chaser's gonna get a dog box when I do it. So I decided to upgrade the transmission in this car to the hopefully better condition CD09. So that's the next step. Clutch, trans, and then we can throw it in the car. So we're here, we're there, we're ready. We got water in the finger dinger, we got oil in the finger dinger. I want to prevent a dry start on this one. I didn't use super thick, viscous assembly lube. So what I'm thinking about is I want to prime the oil coolers. Since there's no oil in them, I want to prime the oil filter. I want to create the least possible scenario for running the engine with no oil pressure. So I'm going to try and pour oil into these oil lines. I'm going to fill up the oil coolers. I'm going to fill up the oil filter. And since we're feeding the side of the block with the remote oil filter, I might even try and prime it, pour some oil down in there and get some oil everywhere we can so that when we crank it, it's just bam, get some pressure on those bearings because I don't want any possible problems with bearings on this one. But we're there, we're ready, we're finally to the point where we're going to see if this thing starts up and runs. I have a little bit of a worry when I rewire these coils. Some of the pins were not great, so every time we take the coils in and out, there's a possibility of it having another problem. So that's the only thing I'm worried about is if it has a slight misfire. But I want to start it up and see what kind of oil pressure we get. So what I did is I took off the oil line from here. This one goes through and feeds directly to the side of the block. So if I fill this up, it should feed the block. And then if I fill this up, it should feed the oil coolers. And then I'm going to spin the oil filter off, fill that up, and hopefully that's good. I want to hear this thing run. It's tuned. The very last pull when it actually failed was like the last check pull. Like it was done being tuned. Everything should be good on it. So I shouldn't have to put it on the dyno again. I've never driven this car, so I literally, well, other than pulling it in and out of the bay, I want to go rip it up and down the street. That's what I'm looking forward to. So let's get it. Oh. I told you I wouldn't spill, Josh. I don't see a better way to do this without making a mess. It's worth it to make a mess to not have a dry bearings. This really isn't that much different than just pouring it in, right? Would have been, oh come on, it's just bubbles. This is frustrating. All right, we'll call that good. And then I'm gonna fill it from here. See how that goes. All right, we got oil everywhere the oil should be. And all I can do is cross my fingers and hope that everything goes well. Not yet. Probably should have been watching the oil pressure. Didn't quite think of that one.
I usually see oil pressure just mount throttle.
Cold start dinger. That'll make sure you got pressure.
Oh dang, we can use another quart. Oh, I got another quart. It's the secret sauce. The last quart. That's 9 quarts of oil in this car.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good. Keep it cool. All right, it's time to hook up the laptop. I'm gonna top this off, hook up the laptop, make sure we got oil pressure, and then I'm gonna let it idle. Just sit here and idle for a while, get everything kind of, you know, and then we'll do a burnout. All right, been running for a little bit. We started at 5.2 oil pressure, 5.2 bar. We started at 5.2 bar of oil pressure. Now we're down to 4.5. So as it heats up, obviously the viscosity will change a little bit, but I mean, our idle AFR looks pretty good. I think our tune is still on point from where we were. So I'm gonna let it run for a while, probably like an hour or so. Make sure that the coolant works, the fans, all that stuff, and then check the oil pressure, and then probably spin a filter on it, and then go do some burnouts. It's power probe time. Power probe.
Do 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 do. Just probe this.
All right. Do some measuring. That's nuts. That's the wrong way. Okay, so do we have ground there? Yes. Do we have power there? Yes. Do we have ground?
Huh. The
Okay, so
ECU
that's
says
from the
it's
ECU.
on, but the ECU is not really turning it on.
But this should be closing ground, right? No, I hooked it. You know, remember? I was supposed to hook this up backwards. That's what I did wrong.
Oh, you need to hook the...
Yep. I remember you told me that. I had to have the red to there and the black to there because I wired it up wrong. All right.
Okay.
Good thing Jake was here. He figured it out for me. All right. Problem solved. Let's go. What could go wrong? Nothing could go wrong. Because I built it. How does it sound from outside?
Amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Sounds awesome.
I hit second gear and it just went. It just went. And these are FD takeoffs. So these are mega grippy 255s. Yeah. And it just went. It just went for it, dude. Smoke it up. Approved. Any knock? No knock yet. No knock. I wouldn't be surprised if it was knocked right there. I'd be, all right. Okay. All right. Next video. That's it for this one. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm happy. Next time is drifting. Bye.